This is The Rundown, your weekly news and review from Western Mass. Good morning, I am Carrie Saldo. It's Friday, April 3rd, 2025. Our rundowners this week: Michael Dobbs of Focus Springfield, the architect of political strategy at Anthony L. Cignoli Associates, Evan Garber, and Elizabeth Román, executive editor for news at NEPM. Good morning, everybody. If you have thoughts while you're listening to us, or for the very first time streaming on YouTube, you can email us therundown@nepm.org. Coming up, our panel's thoughts on some lawmakers from the 413 seeking more support for worker-owned companies, and how transgender individuals are navigating less access to gender-affirming care here in Western Mass. First, a bit of broader context for this week's local news. Thursday marked what some called the most ambitious space launch in over 50 years, with astronauts headed around the moon and back. And a deal was announced to fully reopen the federal government. However, it is yet to be finalized by Congress. And then Wednesday, those hoping for definitive timelines about the war in Iran may have felt like President Trump's address was a bit of an April Fool's joke, given that it was given on April 1st. But here's how Boston Globe's James Pindell called it. President Trump spoke directly to the American people on Wednesday night for the first time since launching a war in Iran more than a month ago. The news, in many ways, was simply that he made the primetime address at all. Nothing he said during the 19-minute speech departed from what he had already posted on social media. Now, the White House, for its part, said in a news release, quote, "After just 1 month, President Trump highlighted the extraordinary achievements of the U.S. military, which has delivered swift, overwhelming blows to the Iranian regime, decimating its navy, shattering its air force, eliminating its key terrorist leaders, and systematically dismantling its ability to threaten America, our allies, and the world." Mike Dobbs, what do you make of the president's address?
That's a lot of aggressive verbs in there. Listen, I don't think anything has really changed. His address didn't change anything. They still haven't come up with a story about why we're doing this. A cohesive story, a story that the American people could actually stand behind. There are many reports about there's additional injuries to American service members that are being covered up. We're seeing the war through sort of a very weird lens. And at the bottom of it, all we're doing is we're creating a real reason for the Iranian people to hate us until the world explodes in the apocalypse. I mean, to really hate us. This was, and nothing has been improved. Nothing has been improved by his speech or by any of his recent actions.
It was interesting. As I was listening to this speech, I thought if I had lived on a desert island for the past month or so and just kind of parachuted in and heard what the president was saying, I might actually think that this was a president announcing the run-up to war, announcing his attempt to make the case to Congress. He kind of solidified. I heard sort of a bit of why he thought. Some of his reasoning was pretty cohesive from what we have heard, I think, kind of leak out in the last month or drip out in the last month. But the Globe reported, Evan, that the decision to deliver an address without making any real announcement may have been the clearest signal yet that the White House understands how unpopular U.S. involvement in this war has become. What do you make of that?
Yeah, not only on how unpopular the war has become, but also generally President Trump and his administration. Last week, we saw his approval rating was around 43%. This week, a new Fox News poll puts it at 41%. So we definitely see his numbers are tanking across many categories, including the economy and also the war. And I think, yeah, like Mike said, it didn't really accomplish anything. We've seen that with this polling numbers. And also the message just has been so incoherent. On social media, we saw the president say that we don't have to be there, meaning in Iran. He said that we're going there to help our allies. In other times, he said we have to start a war there to obliterate their nuclear program. So the messaging is just really inconsistent. And I think you'll start to see the Trump administration try to streamline the messaging, especially as we head to the midterms.
The political consultant zeroing in on the lack of cohesive message. Liz, the disapproval from the war in Iran was among the reasons that protesters took to the streets on Saturdays. I know that you and several people from our newsroom, Jill Kaufman, Umar Verona, covered this, the No Kings protests. What else did protesters tell NEPM?
I mean, I think that's why they were out. I talked to one guy in particular. He had on a Puerto Rican flag, which attracted me, obviously, because I'm also Puerto Rican. But a lot of people were wearing, flags of their nations and coming out. And I spoke with him and I said, "Hey, have you come out to a protest before? Like, why are you here?" And he said he's never done it before. He always honks when he sees people protesting on the overpasses. But he felt like he could no longer sit on the sideline because what the word he used was dangerous. He feels like it's becoming dangerous to exist here, to live here. So I think a lot of people have that sentiment, just feeling like their rights are being slowly, and maybe not even so slowly, taken away from them. Their ability to speak out, and so they're coming out. New people are coming out. People that have been doing it since the first No Kings are still present. So it was a pretty powerful thing to see.
This was the third No Kings rally of the president's second term here. An estimated 3,000 demonstrations, the New York Times says, across the country. About 160 protests were set to unfold across Massachusetts on Saturday, and varying messages from some of the protesters, but organizers have said that's deliberate. This is not a mass movement with one goal in mind, one thing that they are seeking to adjust or speak out against. The Springfield event featured various speakers, including John Rushi, an East Longmeadow resident and former U.S. Marine, who told the crowd that this is not the America he fought for. He said, quote, "I'm standing here today to remind you, but also remind myself. This country belongs to the people, not the agencies, not the strongmen, not to anyone who thinks a badge or a title puts them above the Constitution. And if we forget that, if we stay quiet, if we let fear win, then we are not honoring the freedoms we claim to defend." That was among the folks that
powerful speech from him, and got quite the reaction.
Mike Dobbs, as you're observing this the third time around, what are you thinking?
Well, if my knees weren't arthritic, I would have been down there, but I have problems standing for that length of time. What I think is that this is tremendous. This is like we've had 3 awakenings of the American electorate through these, and I think we're going to find more, and they're going to build each time, because I really believe that we've got a terrible summer ahead of us on so many fronts, things that were created by the Trump administration. I think if they have another one in the fall, it will be absolutely tremendous.
And I think it's built in a really interesting way. Like this past week, it was one of the largest protests ever in American history. But like some of the numbers, I think when you look at town by town, city by city, even interesting, like in Springfield, there was actually less people at the Springfield one this time around than the last. But it seems like that's because people, instead of maybe all going to like the big city, the region, were like, okay, let's organize in our own hometowns.
Yeah.
West Springfield, Westfield,
Palmer.
places that didn't have these big ones before had massive turnouts. So I think that's a really interesting, like, hyper-local aspect to the organization of this protest.
And the Trump administration, for its part, didn't say much about the protests, sort of shrugged them off, as many supporters of President Trump did as well. And there were a few counter-protests here and there, as reported by the New York Times. But Evan, for you, we're 7 months ahead of the midterm elections. Is this increasing pressure on the administration?
It definitely is, because at all of these protests across the country, midterms were on the mind. You had candidates at every one of these collecting signatures to be put on the ballot. Lots of people were talking about the midterms. It's almost an anomaly to have the midterms elections be so front of mind for the American populace this far out. Usually people aren't really thinking about it until July or August in such an acute way. But this year, because of just the enormity of all of the things going on in the country, people are really, really thinking about how could we change, how could we maneuver to give what we want the best chance in the midterm elections.
Yeah,
Okay.
lots of loud vocal calls about we need to vote them out. I think the gentleman from East Longmeadow said that in his speech as well.
All right, moving on. Williamsburg meeting highlights push for worker-owned businesses in Massachusetts. That was the headline, and some reporting by Samuel Jelinas in the Daily Hampshire Gazette this week, quoting State Senator Paul Mark and Representative Lindsay Sabadoza on Wednesday met with leaders of the so-called solidarity economy. The legislators were there to gather feedback and learn how they can best advocate for worker-owned models such as Pedal People and many other throughout the region. This cooperative model, workers ideally set their own wages and share in decision-making about assets while benefiting from flexible schedules, supporting more localized production and industry. Jelinas goes on to say that this idea sort of took hold in the U.S. 20-ish years ago or so. I was surprised to see how many Western Mass businesses operate under this model. Mike Dobbs, how about you?
Well, I certainly was aware of it. Brown's over in East Longmeadow is a worker-owned business. I think that we are going to need every new economic model that we can conceive of to get us through what has happened with the Trump economy. And I know I shouldn't tie everything to Trump, but the bottom line is that there's a lot of unemployed people. There's a lot of people whose jobs are insecure. And what this model does is it creates a new pathway for people. You get a few people together with the common goal of a business that would serve a particular audience. And I think it's a better way of doing things for a lot of people. So I think it will grow, frankly.
And there's a quality of life issue too, right? So if you look at people that are wanting to start collaboratives like this, they can united decide we don't want to work this day, or we're going to take these holidays off. We're all going to get a fair salary. It might not be an amazing salary, but we're all going to be able to live well, take days off when we want to take off. And being a millennial manager and also managing Gen Z, it's very important to them to be able to have time for their regular life. It's not all about like coming and proving yourself and working 80-hour weeks. It's not like that for them. So I think this model seems like it would work for the younger generation.
You mean I didn't have to do that for all those years?
Sorry to put it to you.
Says the boomer geezer in the room.
You can practice that in retirement.
Say what you will about boomers, but they did love creating businesses and they loved being entrepreneurs. And as we come into this boomer kind of retirement stage of our economy, and generations before them just don't have the capital that they had maybe to purchase businesses. This is one way to kind of transfer that. And I also think that the co-op model can make things possible that just aren't before. For instance, the Wellspring Cooperative in Springfield, which is kind of like a co-op that helps other co-ops develop. I mean, they started the first commercial hydroponic farm in Springfield ever, and that was in 2018. And like that, I don't think that would have been economically possible with other business models.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to look at what Senator Paul Mark is trying to do with this. He's filed a bill called the Opportunity to Own. The details, it would require business owners to give workers 30 days notice of a sale. And if workers match the highest viable offer from the open market, then the seller would be encouraged to take a look at that offer as a serious contender. And then if the seller decides to go with the worker ownership model, the seller will get a capital gains tax break if they're successful. So, the state, the proposal is trying to help the state work with people and encourage these types of models. The Daily New Hampshire Gazette also pointed out, you talked about Wellspring, but there's Fitchburg Fiber, which is an internet access company that helps out covering smaller sections. There's Cocinas Latinas, a catering company, Language Justice Solutions, a translation company, Pedal People, which does trash hauling in the area, ECC Services, which is a cleaning co-op, and then on our own underwriting, I hear it all the time, Dean's Beans, organic coffee, that became a worker-owned co-op back in 2023. So like-minded folks are getting behind this idea or have been behind it for some time. And then I was also thinking about out in the Berkshires, tangential to this, Berkshires, which I think is probably more than 25 years old at this point, that's a local currency that was attempted and continues in the Berkshires. So just different ways that folks are looking at this. Paul Mark's bill is being studied currently by the Committee for Economic Development and Emerging Technologies. Evan, thoughts on whether or not that bill is going to gain any traction? What?
We'll see. I mean, the legislature has a lot before it, and there's going to be a lot of noise coming up about all these ballot questions. So I think it may be hard for the legislature to try to focus on things like this that maybe don't have as much public support for them.
Yeah, we'll keep watching it though. All right, still ahead on the rundown. The latest attempt to decrease problem gambling. We'll see if that's going to yield any results or get thoughts from the panel. And under pressure from the Trump administration, Bay State has halted gender affirming care. If you have thoughts, email therundown@nepm.org. You are listening to The Rundown on 88.5 NEPM and streaming on YouTube. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Rundown here on 88.5 NEPM and streaming on YouTube. I'm back with journalists Michael Dobbs and Elizabeth Román and political consultant Evan Garber. Let's get right back into it, okay?
Okay.
Unease grows in Massachusetts as more healthcare providers limit gender-affirming care for minors. The subquote on the headline in the Boston Globe story, it's terrifying. By Sarah Rahl and Maren Wolf, as the Trump administration pushes forward new rules to restrict gender-affirming care for transgender youth, some providers, including 2 in Massachusetts, have already stopped providing treatments, raising fears among some local families that even a state with strong legal protections may not be able to guarantee access. The provider in our region, Bay State Health, stopped offering care in February. Other providers are weighing whether they can continue offering care as lawyers warn of growing legal and financial risks. Liz, Karen Brown in the NEPM newsroom took a look at this week. What impact did Bay State's decision to stop this gender-affirming care have on the folks that she spoke with?
I mean, she spoke with 2 families, one in particular that was very generous, and their 14-year-old son decided to speak with her as well. His name is Bug, and his family had moved from Texas to Massachusetts actually the year previous to him coming out, just because they wanted to have better care, just in general, health care. And then they got here, and he came out. They decided they wanted to do this in a healthy and safe way. They went to Bay State, got him set up, everything was great, and then suddenly they get this notice in February with no explanation saying it's done, it's over, you've got to find other places to go. And while they're in Massachusetts, so there are other places to go, Trans Health in particular is taking on a bulk of the patients that are moving over, it was still jarring to them. The Bug's mom was like, I just didn't expect that Massachusetts would do this preemptively. I never thought that they would do this unless they were forced in some way by the federal government. There were protections here, and now I feel like those are gone. And that's really scary as a parent.
Yeah, I would hear Bay State saying they declined an interview with NEPM for this, but I would hear them saying, their hand was forced in a sense because nearly 70% of Bay State Health's patients rely on Medicaid and Medicare coverage. And Bay State said that they could lose, quote, hundreds of millions of dollars in government reimbursement as a result of the Trump administration's proposed policy. Mike, likely an incredibly difficult decision here, and it's not happening in a vacuum, right? It's coming. We talked in the show on December about Bay State warning about $146 million yearly hit to its finances because of President Trump's signature policy bill. Do you think that the decision to stop gender affirming care would have happened if it weren't for that other pressure?
No, I doubt it. Okay, so here's my question. What's the percentage of the American population who identify themselves as trans?
I don't know the American population, but I do have numbers from Massachusetts here in my notes. You keep talking and I will find it.
Oh, I always heard it's like 1% or under 1%.
Small percentage.
It's 1.4 in Massachusetts.
Okay,
the
so
teenagers.
my question is, why are we doing this? Why can't these folks, we're talking about a relatively, not a relatively, a very small group of people, why can't they get the health care that they need? Why? It's just like, I don't understand why the Trump administration has made such a big deal about trans people and their role in American society. I'm not trying to denigrate them in any way, but the final line to this is that there's not very many of them. So let them live their lives. Let them get the help they need. It's not affecting anybody. It is not affecting anybody. So, yes, I understand with Bay State, they've got a gun against their head. It's simple as that. But on the other hand, it means these folks are really going to have to scramble to get the health care that they deserve to get from other places.
In some sense, leaders in Massachusetts sort of saw this coming, and preemptively, they passed the SHIELD Act 2.0, which seeks to guarantee access to gender-affirming care and reproductive care, despite federal efforts to restrict it. And this is where it gets very confusing for me, because the Globe reported that hospitals in Connecticut, Colorado, and California are facing legal challenges after suspending services. Evan, are you surprised that we haven't seen a legal challenge, given that the state passed this law specifically to protect this?
You know, I am a bit surprised, given our Attorney General is fairly aggressive, but I think it kind of shows the kind of perception of law versus the Trump reality. The Trump administration has just done been so effective at subverting law and subverting states' rights, all while kind of claiming that they are the administration for states' rights. And they've just gotten away with this, and I think our state government made this promise and they're just not keeping it, and more needs to be done with that. And thankfully we do have other organizations that are kind of picking up these patients, but the state government and honestly the Democratic Party writ large needs to do a better job on this issue. It's been pretty. They've done a poor job at protecting this group of people who, you know, they kind of claim to be under their umbrella, and then the best kind of campaign or rallying call around it that the Democrats and people have come up with is trans people exist.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's...
They always have and they always will, but
right.
We also have to provide for them
exactly.
and care for them. I mean, I think there's also this fear of like Bay State, you know, there's 70% of their people on Medicare and Medicaid. You don't want to touch that either, because then you're looking at like loss of health care for children who are in mass health, or, you know, for elderly people who need those services. So I think it's tough on either end, right? Because 70% of your population versus we're talking about 1%. It's the counter argument. I understand where it's coming from. I don't agree with it, but I do understand why that concern is there, why that fear is there.
Attorney General Campbell, for her part, said that, quote, she's going to do everything she can to help support continuity of care for patients across the Commonwealth. She said she had been in contact with Bay State and the company in the eastern part of the state that has ceased this care as well. So, you know, she's saying that she's there and she's trying to put support behind it. The trans patients, as you mentioned, in Western Massachusetts do have other options, at least for now. One family said that their primary care doctor is helping them get access to care. Another is going to Trans Health,
Yes.
which you mentioned. It's a Northampton-based specialty clinic. So while this matter remains in question, at least in the short term, there is some help. All right, the Massachusetts Gaming Commission rolled out Play Well Gambling Harm Prevention Program and did so at a visit to MGM Casino. Jim Kinney reported on this, among others, near the entrance to the MGM Springfield and within sight of the blinking slot machines. Play Well is there to help visitors stop gambling or help them gamble less or just feel in control of how much they are wagering. This program, required by law as part of legalized casino gaming, Gaming replaced the previous responsible gaming program that was known as GameSense, so a little bit of branding here. Play Well, though, Liz, is supposed to be more flexible, according to the Gaming Commission. Karen Brown also reported on this. What did she make? I mean, she's covered gambling for a long time in the NEPM newsroom. Gaming, however, people talk about it in different ways. What does she make of this latest development?
I mean, I think she talked to the commissioner of the Gaming Commission, and it seems like this is a better option. Like there are a bit more protections for people, but she's been covering this for a really long time. And in the past couple of years, what she's found is that a lot of people she talks to say that Massachusetts offers all of these programs, all of this help, and then when you go seek that help, it's not actually available. Like there are therapists available, but a lot of them don't practice. There's hotlines available. You call the hotline, the person's not equipped to deal with it. So we'll see if this will make a difference. I think she's probably a little skeptical. We're a little skeptical because we've seen so many of these programs come across, and none of them seem to have like a true impact on people that are really affected by this. And part of it seems to be the fact that the mentality around gambling is not the same as substance use disorder, right? So it's this idea that it's a moral failing, or same thing that we had with drug abuse, right, back in the day. So this idea that it's a moral failing, or that there's some sort of skill issue, like you're just not good enough, so you're going to keep trying this, and you don't think of it as something that's addictive and like neurologically is a problem. So that makes it difficult to access doctors and to access that sort of help.
Especially when there's such predatory things being used by casinos. The Boston Globe just did a huge series about casinos in the eastern part of the state, and also illegal gambling that happens, targeting Asian populations, like Encore sending free shuttles to predominantly and historically Asian neighborhoods in Boston to get people to go to gamble. So.
To offer free or reduced. Oftentimes you get free money to play, and then people overspend that. But then the other layer to this is online sports betting, which you don't have to go anywhere. You can just grab your phone and sit there. And so we've seen WBUR reporting on this in recent months. And UMass Amherst had research that it spoke about. We're seeing people in their 20s and in their 30s with full-on gambling addictions because of this access. One gentleman told WBUR that he would sneak away from dinner with his now wife, then girlfriend, go into the bathroom and place bets. He would wake up at 2, 3 in the morning to place bets on sports that he didn't even follow overseas, and to the point where he gambled their life savings away and got himself into a treatment program. When we talk about the numbers, 2% of the state's population is experiencing severe harm from this, and roughly 8.4% of the adult general population is at risk, according to Mark Vanderlinden, who is with the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. But, as I mentioned, that UMass research in 2025, it found that rates of sports betting and problem gambling increased among monthly gamblers in Massachusetts 28%. From 21% in just 2 years. So from the time before it was legalized in 23, they started looking at these numbers in 22 in the run-up to legalization, and then to 24. Monthly gamblers who believe that gambling harm outweighs the benefits has been on the rise for the past several years. We're at 56% now in 2024. That's up from 48% just 2 years prior to that. Mike Dobbs?
Hey, I'm old. And when I was a kid, this is how gambling worked. You either had the poker game, your dad and your uncle would go into the den and have the poker game, or you would buy gambling tickets from local members of organized crime, or you went to Vegas. And now all you have to do to gamble is to take that cell phone out. Mm-hmm. And I think what we've done is that we have created an access to an activity that is unparalleled in world history. It's like we've decided this is going to be something that touches everyone in every way. You don't have to make a conscious decision that you're going to go to Vegas or Tahoe or someplace like that, or Atlantic City. No, it's there in your pocket. And honestly, if GameSense didn't work, I'll be curious to see actually how this works. I'm in MGM all the time because I walk through MGM to go to the studios of Focus Springfield. And I want to tell you, there's always one or two very lonely-looking GameSense people sitting there in their nice area. Nobody's paying attention to
because
this.
The idea is that people in the casino can avail themselves of that help by walking up and just talking with one of these folks.
And I've never seen it. I wonder what the stats are to indicate how many people are sitting there and have an epiphany at the slot saying, "Oh, I got a problem. I'm going to go see this person." I'd love to know exactly how that worked. I don't put any great faith in this because you can stomp it out at the casino, but it's in your pocket.
everywhere. Yeah.
And if you're inclined to do this,
And
you're
it's
gonna do
it's addictive. If it's like literally neurologically you're addicted to doing it, it's not as easy to like put yourself on a list to be like, nah, I'm not gonna do that, or I'm gonna have somebody monitor me. I don't know. I'm very curious to see how this works. It's like the mixed messaging, right? We have like all this access to casinos and all this access to gaming, but then we have these small programs that don't seem to be that effective, or that leave a lot of it to the consumer. It's the responsibility of the consumer to get themselves on these lists and to make that initial step. But if they don't see it as an addictive problem, then why would they get themselves on the list?
Some people are reaching out. WBUR did report, especially looking at that 20 to 30 something group, they did see an increase in the number of those folks reaching out to a hotline saying, look,
That's
I do
great.
need some help, and then getting connected with that access to that care. One quick other note, I do think it's interesting. There's a bill that's co-sponsored by Rep. Lindsay Sabadosa and Senator John Keenan that will help to, it's aimed at reducing the social harms. So interesting to see the legislature, which approved this, now putting forth a bill to try and kind of roll back some of this. It gets a little bit tricky. All right. Well, we have come to nearly the end of our program this morning. I want to thank our panel, G. Michael Dobbs, Evan Garber, and Elizabeth Román. And special thanks to Aaron O'Neill from the NEPM newsroom for helping us with the YouTube live stream this morning, getting it up and running. As always, you can email the rundown at nepm.org if you have thoughts. Happy Passover. Happy Easter. Happy NCAA finals. A lot going on this weekend. Join us next Friday on the Rundown.